Hello everyone. So we will be continuing our discussion on ethnographic research methods, and today we will discuss about participant observation and ethnographic roles. So in this lecture we will be understanding how participant observation is the ethnography's core method, how we observe while participating in daily life. There are many ways of doing it. We will distinguish the four researcher roles and their appropriate uses and ethical limits. We will manage the trade-off between participation, which is the insider knowledge, and observation, which is critical distance. We will also navigate ethical challenges related to consent, deception, power, and reflexivity. So let's get started. What is participant observation? Participant observation is defining method of ethnographic research. The researcher observes community members' daily activities while simultaneously participating in the community life. The researcher is both insider, so participating, and outsider, observing, generating unique access to both behavior and meaning. There are four researcher roles that you can choose from. So one can be of complete observer, watches without participating. So in the example of Swalkuchi, I can go and be a complete observer. So they know that I am an observer and I go and observe how they are doing each and every activity. So in this case, when I am saying I am hidden or covert, so what it means is I am visibly present but I am on the side, somewhere behind or somewhere in the corner. So I am not participating in that activity. So it minimizes influence on behavior. So that is the maximum distance context that a researcher can take in ethnographic research. Now I can be also an observer as a participant. So I am primarily an observer, but I participate minimally. So say for example, I want to do a few rounds on the loom to weave a particular motif. I can also go and participate in the reeling process. I can also participate in the dyeing process. So where I can try my hands onto the activity. However, I know my primary activity is the observer's role. So my participation is very minimal. So observing identity is known to the community with whom I am doing this particular study. I can ask questions, I can brief the participation. There is a balance between observation and access. Now there is another way of the researcher's role, which is the participant as observer. So here participates primarily, observes secondarily. So observing identity is still known to the people, to the community. What over here is happening is deep participation, insider access. So the risk over is, however, that you lose the critical distance between your researcher role and your participant role. So in order to create a participant as an observer, I can recruit some people from within the community who are participants, tell all the community that these people are going to act as participants as observer. I train them in observing. Why this risk of losing critical distance is there? Because even they have been trained to be observer, for them this is like so much ingrained in their daily life, they might still lose the observer's criticality. There is a tension between the emic and the etic aspect of it. Then the next one is complete participant. Here I am fully embedded, observing identity hidden or unknown, covert undercover role. There is maximum insider access. However, it is a high ethical risk because you are not telling people that you are actually observing them. You are performing a research over there and you are collecting data. You are not taking consent from them. So let's look at these four participant observation roles in the context of Swalkuchi silk weaving. So let's say I want to be the complete observer. So sit silently in a workshop corner, watching weavers operate jacquard looms without interacting. Document the punch card system, shuttle movements and pedal coordination, no questions, minimal presence. So I can keep observing them for a couple of days and try to make notes, and once this is done, then I can ask them certain questions to understand more about the context. Observer as participant. Identity is disclosed to them that I am an observer primarily and I will be secondary participant. So I will sit with weavers during yarn preparation, asking occasional questions about motifs and meena work, observe the household division of labor across reeling, dyeing and weaving, primary mode for this field work. Then participant as observer. I will learn to operate a basic handloom under a weaver's guidance, experience the physical demands of an 8 am to dusk rhythm, and gain embodied insight into why complex motifs command higher pay. I can also do it for other activities. This is just for example one particular activity. Now complete participant. Work alongside weavers for weeks, sharing meals and festival season preparations. Risk of losing analytical distance. Concealing identity would violate trust in the close-knit community. So try to avoid that complete participant scenario. Now participation versus observation tension that we have been talking about in all these 4 different researcher roles. So in participation, whenever you have more participation, it is deeper insider knowledge, better access to the tacit knowledge, stronger relationships between the community members, better understanding of their meanings. However, there is this risk of losing the critical distance. You become more native and take insider perspective for granted because you are forgetting your researcher's ethic perspective. When you have more observation, you maintain that critical distance required for distinguishing between the emic and the ethic aspects. Spot the patterns that outsiders miss because you are observing them in close context and talking to them. You stay analytical, less emotionally entangled. The risk over here is, however, that you still may remain an outsider only. You might miss the tacit knowledge. Relationships with your participants will stay at a very surface level. So you have to bring in a proper balance between the how much insider you want to become and how much outsider you want to stay. So balancing the participation and the observation is the most important aspect of any ethnographic research. Depending on the context, depending on your expertise level, depending on the time that you have to take a call on what is appropriate. As you keep practicing more and more on this, you will become an expert of how to balance the participation versus observation. So now looking at conducting participant observation sessions. So in order to do this before the session, you have to have a review of the background of the community, the setting, the norms. Prepare questions, observation focus, secure informed consent and establish rapport. Then when you are doing the observation, during the observation, you have to watch the activities, do interactions, the routines that they have. Take field notes. When you are taking these field notes, try to be as minimal, as non-intrusive and as possible, and maybe later in the day go and expand on them more. Attend to the physical space, artifacts, body language of the people that you are observing. During the participation process, join activities when invited or appropriate, ask questions, be helpful, build relationships and maintain this observer role identity. During this process, you can also ask clarifying questions. So in natural movements, ask about what you observe, test your emerging understanding, and collaborative interpretation should be done. So it should not be just the interpretation of the researcher. After the session is over, expand on your field notes with details, quotes, impressions, reflect on your roles, biases and what you missed, document the insights and the patterns. So let's discuss about the ethical challenges in participant observation. So you should always take informed consent. So participants must know who you are and why you are there. Observing role and research purpose should be disclosed. Refresh consent periodically. Deception creates ethical breaches. So if you start working with a particular family very closely, after a certain point of time they might just forget that you are a researcher, you are an outsider, but you should not forget that. Before taking any photograph, you should always ask for a consent. Before videographing a process, you should ask for consent. If they tend to show you a certain design as this is a heritage design, this is my specialty, always take informed consent before you record it and do not share all these data without consent. Then comes power imbalances. Researchers have power. Understand this very carefully. You choose what to focus on. So that is your main power. You also choose how to interpret it. And you also choose whether to reveal the findings or not. That's why the researchers have high power in this context. And you need to acknowledge this. Share the preliminary findings with participants and take permission before you can share it ahead. Informed consent also means that the person should have the capability to give that informed consent. So let's say if the person is not well educated, they might not understand the implications of putting their photograph on a particular finding document which is going to be shared with others. So informed consent always implies that not just informing that I will share it, but also telling the implications of it, so that proper information is given and they can take informed decisions under such conditions. Data sensitivity. Participation gives access to sensitive behaviors, conversations, vulnerabilities. That is always the case whenever you are doing ethnographic research. You have to protect participants' confidentiality rigorously. Don't use observed behavior against the participants in any way, not even when you are trying to elicit information from others. You have to anonymize it. So let's say I want to understand why this person's weaving technique is different, or their approach to weaving is different. I can say that in my previous research I had observed this kind of behavior, this kind of activity. Here I observed something differently. Can you explain what is the motive behind doing it in this particular fashion? Anonymize even if you want to declare what others are saying, and even in anonymity also declare only that much that it does not result into intellectual property breach for another participant. So now let's look at these ethical considerations in the context of Swalkuchi fieldwork. So as I told you, consent and power. So it applies even for informed consent. So informed consent must be ongoing, not one time. So you can see I am hiding in plain sight over here and I am observing how this weaver is working. So each time I go over there, so today I might take certain informed consent before starting recording, and tomorrow I should again repeat the same, because for her now I have become somebody who just exists out there. So but I should remember to take this informed consent not just one time but again and again. In this distributed economy where weavers hold significant bargaining power and entrepreneurs are paying these advances of rupees 15,000 to 20,000 and weavers are free to leave at any time, the researcher must be equally transparent about how observations will be. So what it also implies is, if in my observation and in my questioning I am going to take 1 hour of their time, I should also think of how I am going to compensate them adequately for that 1 hour that they are going to give me, so that they are giving me that 1 hour, not trying to rush because they are losing money over there. So any intervention must not reduce weaver income or disrupt existing power balance. So let's say I am asking this certain questions to the weaver and the entrepreneur with whom they are working is also stationed at the same place. It might disrupt the power balance in their ecosystem. So I should not do it. That causes this kind of imbalances. Now coming to researcher reflexivity. So researcher reflexivity applies to the power imbalances that the researcher has. So the researcher must continuously reflect on how their urban academic background shapes what they notice and what they overlook. So say for example, for me as an urban researcher, I would say that, oh, this is very good. Earlier a motive took 30 seconds to make, now it is going to take 2 seconds. So why are they not adopting it? They can adopt it, and because if they adopt it, they can make weave more and they can make more of these motifs and they can get paid more. However, only when I speak to the weavers, I understand their context. They get paid on the basis of the length that they weave. They get paid on the basis of the number of motifs and the complexity of the motifs that they are weaving and the number of buttas that they are making within each of these motifs. Now, this process of making buta can be made very fast. So they are bothered by the fact that this highest level of income, which was on the basis of the number of butas that they were making, will not be compensated enough by the amount of extra length or extra number of motifs that they are making. Hence, they had this thing that no, we will not accept this less laborious, less time consuming technology, because it will reduce our income. Also, it will reduce the pride that we have in the fact that I am very good at making these butas and I will be taken in for certain kind of jobs which requires this specialized service. So, because of this concern which the weavers had, even the entrepreneurs agreed. So, now my outsider perspective led me to assumptions about efficiency, but it needed to be bracketed within the community's priorities. The community did not prioritize efficiency. What they prioritized was the art and the artistic recognition that somebody gets and the additional money that they would make, which cannot be compensated by the efficiency increase. Now, coming to the traditional knowledge, it applies to the data sensitivity. So, Swalkuchi motifs encode generational knowledge and cultural identity. The community obtained a trademark in 2016 through the Swalkuchi Tahatunnan Samiti to combat fake products. They also set up a silk testing laboratory that certifies each garment on the type of silk which has been used. So, researchers must negotiate what can be published and ensure weavers retain ownership of traditional design knowledge if they want to retain ownership, if that is even relevant in this context. Or as in this particular context, most of the traditional design is actually a shared intellectual property, but the new ones that they are making are something which they like to preserve. However, as soon as it enters into the market, within a very short time span, it is being copied by others as well. So, I have to understand the kind of data sensitivities which are important in this particular context, which need to be preserved even when I am doing my ethnographic research. So, the observer becomes part of the observed. Reflexivity requires honesty about that influence. So, the insights the only participant observation can reveal are, so from the phenomena in Swalkuchi, which is only about sustained presence, can surface and which becomes invisible in interviews or surveys. So, here are some of these insights. So, what we identified was an embodied rhythm of weaving. So, hands flying with the shuttle, feet across 3 bamboo pedals, eyes reading punch card line by line, invisible in verbal accounts. So, these aspects, how they are performing it and how it just keeps on happening, how they get trained into these, that is something which cannot be identified in interviews and surveys. Interviews and surveys can tell you that, oh, somebody takes 1 month to get trained in X level of proficiency and so on. It cannot create that rich context of the embodied rhythm which is involved in the activities. The hidden material waste. So, when we were initially engaging into interviews to understand the whole ecosystem, what kind of wastes are being generated, mostly people were concerned about chemical dyes. Nobody even mentioned about the fact that each punch card can be used to produce only approximately 10 saris or mikla chadars, and then new cards have to be cut, and this particular old punch cards, they don't have any recycling facility or municipal garbage collection, they just burn it. Only after spending participant observation, we saw how the punch cards were getting replaced and how often, and then when we asked, okay, what happens to the waste, we were able to discover this hidden material waste which is happening. Then we asked that why didn't you try other material like plastic based punch cards which might have longer lifespan. So, they again mentioned, yes, we have tried that also, but that did not deliver the quality, that had worse lifespan, and at the end of its life we did not have any way of recycling. It created more waste, it created more pollution. So, we decided to stick to our cardboard based punch card sets only. The unspoken hierarchies and skill. So when we would ask in surveys, in interview questions, how much time does somebody take to set up the loom? So we would get very varied results. Only after doing this participant observation for a week, we realized that there are different kinds of these loom setters. The specialized setters, they require only 2 to 3 hours, whereas the others take about 6 to 7 hours. So entrepreneurs with more than 50 plus looms, they operate differently from the entrepreneurs who have 1 to 2 looms per household. So all these differences, which were about the unspoken hierarchies and skills, they started emerging because of the participant observation. We also saw the seasonal intensity and the collective power. So during wedding and bihu seasons, people stretch over hours. They might work for long hours at night, wake up too early in the morning and keep working. However, during the actual bihu celebration, the weavers take almost a month of holiday. So all the weavers of Swalkuchi who come from outside Swalkuchi, they are gone back to their home, and almost there is no work, no weaving work happening during that particular month over there. Weavers collectively ensured the magnetic bobbin innovation, which improved the efficiency of making color within a motif faster. They collectively ensured that it does not cut their per piece pay despite the faster output, and because of their collective effort, the entrepreneurs could not exploit them. So from this particular case study and understanding how participant observation works, we have the following key takeaways. So participant observation is the core method of ethnography. Researcher observes while participating in daily community life, generating access to both behavior and meaning. There is role spectrum within which the researcher can work. So you can be a complete observer to a complete participant. Design ethnography typically uses observer as participant, mainly observing but participating enough to access tacit knowledge. Balance the trade-offs. Balance participation, which is about depth and insider access, against observation, which is critical distance and pattern spotting. Optimal balance depends on the research questions that you have. The ethical practice. Have informed consent. Power awareness should be there with the researcher that they have higher power and they have to create proper ways in which they can balance out this power. There has to be reflexivity and confidentiality. All are essential for ethical practices in participant observation. Deception undermines research integrity, so please do not involve into it in any way. Here are some of the references that you can go through. Thank you so much. See you in the next lecture.